Imagine a world where every agreement you enter, whether it's renting an apartment, buying a car, or even making a bet with a friend, executes automatically without the need for a lawyer or a notary. In this world, trust is not placed in institutions or individuals, but in code itself. This is the essence of smart contracts, self-executing agreements coded onto the blockchain, where the terms are directly written into the code, and the execution occurs without intermediaries. Picture this: you agree to pay for a concert ticket. Instead of waiting for a seller to confirm your payment or a ticketing platform to process the transaction, the smart contract knows the conditions. Once you pay, it automatically delivers the ticket to your digital wallet. No waiting, no fraud, no dispute, just seamless execution. This simplification could democratize access to transactions, removing the gatekeepers who traditionally held power over these agreements. But what does this mean for our understanding of trust and authority? As we reduce reliance on intermediaries, we also shift the balance of power. The strange consequence is that institutions designed to maintain order and trust might find their influence waning. Imagine banks, legal systems, or even governmental functions being rendered less essential in a society where agreements are enforced by immutable code. If this power dynamic shifts, who benefits? Certainly the everyday person might enjoy lower costs and increased access to services. However, established powers may perceive this as a threat to their authority. They could respond with resistance, attempting to regulate or undermine these technologies, fearing the loss of control over economic and legal systems. What would happen if smart contracts gained traction in governance? We could envision a society where everything from voting to public services is managed through transparent, automated agreements. But would this truly liberate us, or could it lead to new forms of surveillance and control? As we explore the implications of smart contracts, we must ask ourselves, what happens when trust is placed not in people or institutions, but in lines of code? This inquiry leads us into a complex landscape where innovation and tradition collide, and where the stakes are nothing less than the future of governance itself. Imagine a world where the written word is a privilege reserved for the elite, where knowledge flows only through the hands of a select few. What if the printing press had never been invented? The implications are staggering. Without the ability to mass-produce texts, the Renaissance, a vibrant period of cultural and intellectual awakening, might have remained a whisper, stifled by the iron grip of the church and monarchies. The church, fearing the erosion of its authority, went to great lengths to censor ideas that could undermine its control over the faithful. It understood that literacy was a double-edged sword. While it could elevate the spirit, it also had the potential to ignite rebellion against established doctrine. The strange consequence is that the very act of reading could empower the masses, allowing them to question and challenge the status quo. As pamphlets began to circulate, ideas about governance, morality, and individual rights spread like wildfire. The once untouchable power of the church faced unprecedented challenges as the common man began to realize that he had a voice. This was not merely a matter of ink and paper, it was an ideological revolution. The printing press democratized knowledge and fostered a new sense of agency among the populace. Imagine the fear that gripped those in power as they watched this shift unfold. The church and monarchs could no longer dictate the narrative, they could only scramble to regain control. They imposed censorship, enforced bans on certain texts, and sought to regulate what could be printed. In their desperation, they revealed a fundamental truth. The greatest threat to their power lay not in armies or wealth, but in the ideas that could be shared and disseminated widely. Now, as we consider the rise of smart contracts, we find ourselves in a strikingly similar scenario. Established powers, from governments to traditional financial institutions, are grappling with the implications of a technology that could disrupt their control over transactions and agreements. Just as the printing press empowered individuals to share and access information freely, smart contracts promise to automate and democratize the process of agreement execution, removing the need for intermediaries. But what happens when the very fabric of power is threatened? We must scrutinize the ideological fears that drive the current resistance to smart contracts. Who stands to lose if contracts can be executed without oversight? The answer is complex, as it intertwines with issues of trust, governance, and the very structure of society. The Church's historical response to the printing press serves as a cautionary tale. Their attempts to suppress new ideas only fueled the flames of dissent. Today we might ask ourselves, will the digital age echo this pattern? Will those in power attempt to stifle innovation out of fear that they will lose their grip on authority? The questions grow more profound. If smart contracts enable a new level of transparency and efficiency, will we see a resurgence of censorship, this time in the digital realm? The echoes of the past provide valuable lessons as we navigate this brave new world. Understanding the ideological motivations behind resistance to change not only enriches our perspective on history, but also prepares us for the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead in our relationship with technology. Imagine a world where every piece of information you seek flows freely, unrestricted by the barriers of traditional authority. The internet promised this revolution, a democratization of knowledge that would empower individuals and upend long-standing hierarchies. Yet as we delve into its evolution, we discover a contrasting narrative, one where the very forces that once held sway over knowledge and information sought to regain control, often through stringent regulation and censorship. What would happen if we examine the historical resistance to the internet with the same scrutiny we apply to emerging technologies today? For instance, consider the response of governments when the internet began to infiltrate their spheres of influence. In China, the Great Firewall was erected not merely as a technical barrier, but as a symbolic fortress against the tide of unregulated information. The state employed sophisticated methods of filtering and censoring content, striving to maintain its grip on the narrative and, by extension, its power. This raises an essential question. What are the implications when a government feels threatened by the very tools that empower its citizens? The strange consequence is that the more accessible information becomes, the more determined traditional authorities may be to control it. This dynamic mirrors the response we see today toward technologies like smart contracts, which have the potential to disrupt existing power structures. We can also look to the United States, where the rise of the internet led to fierce debates over net neutrality. Internet service providers argued for the right to manage their networks freely, while advocates for net neutrality warned of a slippery slope toward a tiered internet, where access to information would be dictated by the highest bidder. This tug-of-war exemplifies the struggle between innovation and control, raising the stakes for everyone involved. Would we as users accept a world where our access to information is dictated by corporate interests? The ongoing battle for control over the internet reveals a familiar pattern of resistance, comparable to the pushback against the advent of the printing press centuries earlier. Just as the church once feared the distribution of printed material could undermine its authority, modern institutions grapple with the implications of widespread access to information. The digital age has transformed our relationship with knowledge, yet the fear of losing control remains a potent force. Industries, too, have had to adapt or face obsolescence. The music industry, for example, was slow to embrace digital distribution, initially opting to protect its traditional revenue models. The backlash against file-sharing platforms like Napster illustrated a desperate attempt to cling to the past. The eventual realization that adaptation was necessary led to the rise of streaming services, fundamentally reshaping how we consume music. This historical lens prompts us to consider, how might today's established powers react to the rise of smart contracts? With the potential to automate and decentralize agreements, smart contracts challenge the very foundations of traditional governance and commerce. The stakes are high, as those in power might resort to similar tactics of regulation and censorship to mitigate the perceived threats. So we must ask ourselves, in this ongoing struggle between innovation and control, who emerges victorious, and at what cost? As we navigate this complex landscape, recognizing the ideological motivations behind resistance not only illuminates our past, but also equips us to anticipate the future of governance in the digital age. Imagine a city where every transaction, every agreement, operates seamlessly through lines of code, a vibrant ecosystem where trust is placed not in individuals or institutions, but in the immutable logic of smart contracts. What would happen if you could walk down a bustling street and with each step you encountered automated systems, ensuring that everything from your morning coffee to your evening rental was executed flawlessly? No more waiting for approvals, no more ambiguity, just a world where every promise is kept thanks to the precision of blockchain technology. But as we envision this future, we must ask ourselves, would this newfound efficiency liberate us or bind us in unforeseen ways? In this smart contract society, transparency reigns. Every citizen can see the terms of agreements, from public service contracts to personal leases, all laid bare on the blockchain. Imagine a community where corruption is nearly impossible, as every interaction is recorded and verifiable. Yet the strange consequence of such clarity is that it could lead to a new form of inequality. Those with the knowledge and skills to navigate this digital landscape would thrive, while others might find themselves marginalized, unable to understand or engage with the systems that govern their lives. What if being smart became a prerequisite for participation in society, not just in terms of intelligence, but in technical savvy? Furthermore, consider the implications for governance itself. With smart contracts managing everything from tax collection to public welfare programs, would we become passive recipients of decisions made by algorithms? The beauty of automation lies in its efficiency, but the risk is a loss of human agency. Picture a scenario where a smart contract dictates the allocation of resources based on data-driven algorithms, prioritizing efficiency over empathy. Would community values and human needs be sidelined in favor of cold calculations? As we automate governance, we might inadvertently create systems that are less responsive to the nuanced realities of human experience. And what of dissent in this automated world? Suppose you disagree with a policy encoded into a smart contract. How would you voice your concerns? In a society governed by code, traditional methods of protest may lose their potency. Instead of rallying in the streets, would we find ourselves trying to hack or alter the code itself? The very mechanisms designed to empower us could also stifle our voices, making it challenging to effect change when the system is so rigidly defined by its underlying algorithms. Moreover, let's also consider the potential for exploitation. In this landscape, entities that control the technology and infrastructure behind smart contracts could wield unprecedented power. Corporations might use their influence to shape the terms of these contracts to their advantage. Would we witness a new digital elite, crafting agreements that benefit themselves, while leaving the rest of society grasping for the crumbs? The automation of governance could lead to a chilling scenario where the most vulnerable are left without recourse, their fates determined by those who write the code. Thus, as we imagine this smart contract society, we must grapple with the question of control. Who truly holds the power when governance is reduced to automated scripts? The lines between freedom and control blur, and we are left pondering whether this technological advancement brings us closer to a utopia or a dystopia. Ultimately, the challenge is not just to embrace the efficiency of smart contracts, but to ensure that they serve the common good, rather than entrench existing inequalities. Where do we draw the line between innovation and oversight? In this brave new world, the stakes are high, and our choices will shape the very fabric of society. Imagine a world where the lines of code governing our agreements are not just a technical marvel, but a fundamental challenge to those in power. As smart contracts gain traction, what would happen if governments and corporations felt their influence waning? Picture a scenario where a city, once bustling with traditional commerce, finds itself increasingly reliant on these automated contracts, transactions happening seamlessly, trust built into the system itself. The strange consequence is that established powers, feeling the tremors of this shift, might respond not with collaboration, but with resistance. What ideological motivations might drive such a backlash? This is where our thought experiment takes a twist. As smart contracts threaten to disrupt the status quo, the very institutions that once regulated our lives may turn to a range of strategies to reclaim control. Let's explore the potential responses of those traditional powers. First, we might see legislation aimed at regulating or even outright banning smart contracts. Imagine lawmakers, perhaps influenced by powerful lobbyists, crafting bills that label these decentralized agreements as risky or untrustworthy. They might argue that without oversight, smart contracts could facilitate fraud, money laundering, or other illicit activities. This narrative plays on public fears, tapping into an age-old strategy, create a sense of urgency around safety and security to justify restricting innovation. But the irony is palpable. By doing so, they could stifle technological advancement that might actually enhance transparency and accountability. Next, consider the role of propaganda in this unfolding drama. If smart contracts are portrayed as the harbingers of chaos, the general public might lose trust in decentralized systems. Governments and corporations could launch campaigns designed to undermine the legitimacy of smart contracts, framing them as tools for the elite or as overly complex mechanisms that ordinary people cannot comprehend. What if they flooded media channels with stories of people losing their life savings due to smart contract failures? The narrative could shift from one of empowerment to one of caution, creating a cultural atmosphere where people are hesitant to embrace these new technologies. Moreover, we could see existing institutions attempting to adapt smart contracts to fit within their traditional frameworks. Imagine a bank that adopts smart contracts, but only in a way that maintains its central authority, charging fees for the use of these contracts while limiting their true potential for decentralization. Here, the ideological battle is clear. Instead of embracing the transformative nature of smart contracts, they are co-opted to reinforce existing power structures. This is not just about maintaining control. It's about redefining what innovation means to preserve influence over the economy and society. But let's ask ourselves, what happens to society when these tensions play out? If governments and corporations successfully undermine trust in smart contracts, the innovation could stall, and we might miss out on a paradigm shift that could democratize governance and enhance individual autonomy. The question then becomes, who truly benefits from this resistance? In this scenario, entrenched interests maintain their grip, while innovators and the public at large are left to grapple with missed opportunities for empowerment and transparency. As we consider these potential strategies of resistance, it's crucial to recognize the underlying ideologies at play. What motivates those in power to cling so desperately to their influence? Is it fear of losing control, or perhaps a genuine belief that they alone can safeguard the public from the perceived dangers of decentralization? The ideological motivations are complex and multifaceted, revealing a struggle not just over technology, but over the very nature of governance and societal structure. In this thought experiment, we find ourselves at a crossroads. As smart contracts pave the way for a new era of transactional integrity, the responses from established powers will shape the landscape of our future. Will they adapt and collaborate, harnessing the benefits of smart contracts for the collective good? Or will they resort to fear-mongering and regulation, perpetuating a cycle of control that stifles innovation? The answers to these questions not only influence the trajectory of technology, but also define our societal values and aspirations. In contemplating these possibilities, we must remain vigilant and engaged, for the stakes are high and the future is unwritten.